Before we start the meditation, let me tell you a story about something which just came to my mind when I was climbing down the staircase. there's a Buddhist sutta called the Salla Sutta, which appears in the Pali Canon. Salla means in Pali language an arrow or a very sharp knife. So this is actually the basis behind the idea that we commonly use as mindfulness, which I am not a fan of the word mindfulness. Mind freeness, mind emptiness are better ideas than mindful. But I probably would think that whoever who coined that term probably would have thought carefulness or more attentiveness. Awareness is the word behind mindfulness. But we need to be careful with words sometimes. It carries a negative connotation. Mind is full, which is not an ideal case when the mind is full. However, this term comes specifically with mindfulness or awareness. The word for that in Pali is called sati. Satipatthana. Sati is the word for that. So Salla Sutta, the sharp arrow or the sharp knife discourse that Buddha is discussing with someone comes when, in this situation, someone who understands the mind will be only shot by one arrow. But someone who does not understand the mind will be shot with two arrows. What does that mean? So let's say that in our day-to-day life, we come across experiences. We hear things, we taste things, smell things, we have touch, we sense things, so we have this sensory experience. However, we live in another reality where we have an interpretation of these senses. We sort of interpret what it means, and to each person, what it means could be different. That's why some people really like punk rock, metallic, and some hate it because they interpret sound differently. You could say that some of these preferences are deep down in a genetic level. They are deep down, and some people have natural predispositions and likes and dislikes. Like some people can't tolerate cilantro. They genetically hate it. They can't eat it. Some people are okay with that. But if you take what is beauty, what is good, what is bad, what is moral, what is immoral, there seems to be a lot of cultural influence in that, thinking influence. So there's a social component to it, there's an individual component to it. Now, what Salla Sutta means is that we always continuously keep interpreting things that we hear, that we see, that we taste, smell, etc. Let's take that there's a family, there's a daughter, there's a mother, father, and another daughter's girlfriend. So this daughter, let's call her Mary. Mary is viewed by different people differently. For some, she's the daughter. For some, she's the partner. For some, she's the friend. But who is real Mary? Do we see the real Mary? Right? So I ask this question every day. Do you see a monk here? Right? A lot of people see a monk here, but people who has no idea about a monk, it's someone who's wearing a very weird fancy dress. I've been asked a few times whenever I travel up north. People ask me, one young boy came during summer and asked me, dude, you're wearing a really nice dress, can I borrow it for Halloween? Because it's he doesn't know about a monk, so he does not see a monk here. But people who have seen a monk on internet sees a monk here. And people who know me to be doing meditation or whatever, they see a different monk. So it's not the same monk here. Is that monk here, or is that monk lives in everyone's mind? Right? So that's the second arrow that we are talking about. We cannot, if we have not practiced our awareness, this separation between what we experience and how we interpret that experience. If we don't know the two spheres, we can be hit by two arrows. I'll give you another example. I hear, because we go to women's crisis response, I hear domestic violence all the time. There's a lot of gender-based violence. It's gender-based violence now. So let's say that someone gets a small slap on the wrist, right? Don't do that. Now there's a pain component to it, and there's an emotional component to it. You can be heavily you can be very upset with that very simple thing. I'm not trying to justify that hitting someone is a good thing, but then there's a physical component to it, there's an emotional component to it, how we interpret it. If that happens accidentally, when someone comes and bumps into you and said, oh, I'm really sorry that I knocked by accident, we are completely okay to let go of that. But the sensation is still the same. It probably is the same sensation. And if a very ignorant young kid does that, we are still fine with it. They are kids, they are cute, that's what they do, they play. It was an unintended thing, and then we are okay. But if we think someone intentionally did that, not that someone really intentionally did that, but if we think someone intentionally did that, that would be more hurting. So that second hurt, that secondary hurt, is this secondary arrow that we are talking about, not the first arrow. First arrow is unavoidable. If you are born human in this world, there's an unavoidable amount of physical suffering, even mental suffering. When we are thirsty, that's a form of suffering which we can't avoid. No matter who you are, even whether you are King Alexander, whether you are Genghis Khan or Buddha, you have to suffer those things. You are hungry, it's sometimes very warm, sometimes very cold, you have to endure that. But then there's a secondary form of suffering or disheartening which appears, the second arrow. That's because we do not separate the experience and the interpretation of the experience. Here the experience is specifically what we see, what we hear, basically our five senses, and including our mental factors. What are mental factors? We are just doing nothing, we are not experiencing anything, but suddenly things appear in our mind and we interact with those things. So while coming down, I was thinking that we are living in four worlds. These are the four worlds. The first world is the world as it is, which is the absolute real world. For the time being, let's call it the real world. That there are real sounds, real vibrations, real chemical smells, so real experiences which are out there. And then there is a secondary world where most of us usually live. That is the interpretation of those senses. We interpret this sense as that I am looking at a tree. I'm not seeing a tree, I'm interpreting what I see as a tree. Now that's a secondary world. There's a tertiary world, the third world. A lot of people, if they go and they get stuck there, that's not an ideal world to live in. That's taking this tree idea even beyond, and then living in a completely wrong reality, which could be very far from reality. We could at least call seeing a tree is somewhat closer to reality. But then I'm looking at a tree where there are smurfs and possessed beings and gods living in this tree. That would be a very different reality. Again, we can't deny that. But then in my country, people believe that trees have gods and deities in it, in every tree. They are called Bhumata Devata. They are little deities who are living in the ground level and in big trees. Because where I was born, Sri Lanka was an animistic country. It was a very animistic country. There was the worshipping of trees, because people believe that trees have deities who are living there, and if you go and pray to these big trees, the big trees can do good things. Smaller trees probably can't, but there was a respect for trees, and I don't know how that idea came. Even in many cultures, we see worshipping trees, sacred trees. The peepal tree is a very sacred tree. So that's a different reality, which you don't see, which you don't experience. It's completely in your head. Again, I'm not trying to say that reality is wrong or right. I'm just telling that there's another reality that we can live like that. Did you watch Avatar, the movie? Mm-hmm. That's a reality that no one has seen. But James Cameron somehow saw it in his mind, which is a nice reality. So that's the third reality. So we have a second reality where we are experiencing things. The water, I experience the cold, I experience the waterness or the liquidness. I experience ABCD things with that with minimal interpretation. I can identify water from coffee, water from cold and hot. That's my identification. It doesn't go beyond that this water is elixir, or this water is a fancy water. Because we drink all types of fancy water, Evian, Perrier, that water is better than tap water. So We don't go there. But then there's the fourth world, which is another world which is most practical to live. That is the understanding that we will never be able to really understand or even completely comprehend the reality of the world. That we are also not in that dreamy world, which is completely a distorted reality. We are also not in that interpreting world, but we are with a higher awareness and with the understanding that this is the limitation of our mind. That's the fourth world. What do you think about that? It's a new theory I'm going to coin now. I will call it the coming down the staircase theory. But don't think too much about it. What I said is something that you can experience day to day. So awareness or the practice of sati, mindfulness, is around that second layer where we cannot not interpret things. For example, when I hit the ball with a mallet, you would immediately identify it's a metal sound, usually coming from a Tibetan ball. It's almost impossible to not identify that. But we stop there. We don't create stories beyond that, right? We just stop there. But if you want to create stories, please go ahead, do that, make a movie and be like James Cameron, which is perfectly fine. In fact, if we don't create stories, world will be very boring, right? We love stories. We love these narratives. These narratives are sometimes very therapeutic. They help you to get away from worldly problems, worldly sufferings, even get away from our traumatic incidents. Let's say that I believed that this tree has a deity in it. If something bad happens to me day to day in my temple life, I come down here and I pray to the plant deity, please plant deity, help me to be free. And that would really help me. That has a nice effect. It can help me to move on. So therapeutically, those type of narratives has been very famous in the world. And these narratives are usually called religions, right? Again, with all due respect to all religions, why I'm saying that, I'm in the Interfaith Grand River and I come across so many different religions, different narratives, and including Buddhism. And there are so many Buddhisms. There's Tantrayana, there's Mahayana, Theravada. And I see there's a lot of stories and people are getting healed with these stories. They are quite therapeutic. But then if there's a way that we don't get traumatized in the first place, that would be even better. There's a saying that prevention is always better than cure, right? So we get traumatized and then go for a cure. What is even better is how to not get traumatized in the first place. Now, what do we do? How do we do that? What if we tune ourselves to that initial second world, not to the real world, because we cannot experience the reality as it is. We see a reality and we don't go into that dreamy world, that narrative building world. We see things as it is. When someone comes and says something unpleasant to us, we look at the sound, we look at the intention, and we do not create a further reality. When we smell something which is supposed to be bad, we just smell it and move on. Like right now when we are meditating, we might get a pain in our body. My knee is hurting and I can't meditate. I'm such a bad meditator because I'm not good at this. I can't sit for so long. Now that's a secondary layer. But what I feel is my knee is hurting. That's it, right? So if we understand, if we identify how to stop there, we won't be traumatized. And I have an experience where I went to a funeral of a family. There were 3 kids. They were all very young and the father died. Father was in his 40s. He died very young. The 2 kids were devastated. They were 10 years, 8 years old. They were very upset about the father's demise. The youngest kid, who was around 2 years, who did not even speak, he was playing under the coffin. Right? So ignorance sometimes doesn't take us to that narrative-based world because he doesn't understand. He doesn't know how to create that story. But whoever who can create that story can be upset. But what do you really experience when someone passes away? You experience that someone is there. Now you don't see that person. Now it's easier for me to say, but harder if it's someone who's close to you. But what we really see is someone was there today and then that someone was gone. I don't see that person anymore. That's it. But our mind has a way of creating a story of so many things, and that's grief, lamentation. That's a very essential part of living misery. A lot of people, pretty much everyone in the world, goes through this separation of a loved one, right? Whether it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend moving away from you, or someone who's close to you dying. Maybe it's a animal, maybe it's a pet, maybe it's a person. It's almost unavoidable. But our real experience is this person image was there, next day that image is not there, that sound is not there. That's our real experience. If somehow, if we know a way to stop there and not take our mind further into a different reality, our world will be more peaceful and more blissful. Would you agree?